The youth started an adventure to save Hyrule. Some kind of writing was inscribed on the stone tablets that the youth found in the dungeons. Princess Zelda predicted that the Book of Mudora would be needed to decipher the writings on the tablets. The youth went with Agina to the house of Link, the hero, in search of the Book of Mudora. Oh, you're awake. Are you going out again today? Don't overstrain yourself. Ah, that's right, I kept all your possessions here. Don't forget to take them with you. And we once again get the big bag. When you go outside, you can use the ocarina to call a bird. It'll take you any place you wish. First, you should search for the 5th stone tablet. I'll go look for the Book of Mudora. I'm not certain of its location, but if you go outside and press the X button, it should appear on your map. And indeed it will, but first check this chest for the power of worn-out gloves. We can now lift rocks with them, but we won't be able to use them repeatedly. Basically, we can now lift one of the white stones per screen. If you lift more than one, well, you can't. You have to leave the screen and come back in order to lift another one. But with that, hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play BS Legend of Zelda, the Ancient Stone Tablets. In the last part, we finished off week 2, and now we're going to start off week 3. And as usual, we're starting off not by going to the first dungeon, which is actually to the south towards where a familiar place was in the original Link to the Past. We're going to go look for some heart pieces instead. Starting off, head southwest of Link's house, and we can already find our first one here in this little cave with a chest. I do have to say, I like the idea of the worn-out gloves because it means that you can't exactly sequence break, because white stones are one of the things blocking you off from certain areas. As are black stones, actually. If you try to go back to some prior areas or go to later areas earlier on in the game, you'll be blocked off by those. Though it makes me wonder, if you use like a Game Shark code to make you already have that, what happens? And next up, right on the northeastern side of this part of the map, we can actually go into this cave for a couple things. First off, as usual, there's a heart piece in here. I think it's in the top left chest. But there's also some rupees we can get here. I forget how you can get all 4 chests at once. I never memorized that pattern. I'm assuming it's similar to the one over in Kakariko Village, but the hell if I know. So you have to turn exit twice in order to get everything the way I go about it, at least. Now, one thing that I'm going to make note of now, and you'll see it again later on in this part, is that if you look at the map, Lake Hylia is still in the bottom right of the map. However, it's been massively downsized. It's not even like a third of the size it was in the original game, I think, which I have to wonder why. Mind you, that Lake Hylia was very important to begin with, but it's a curious design change. And in here we just get some rupees. 6,400. Oh boy. I'm trying to think, how much would I have had by like not even 3 hours into A Link Between Worlds? Probably somewhere close to at least 8,000, but good lord. Either way, heading into where the Swamp Palace was in the Dark World in Link to the Past leads us to Dungeon 5. Which, I'm kind of neutral to this one, I'll be honest. Starting off though, you do need to head west, because the thing that is over this, let's just say it's kind of needed. And here's not only a key, but also the dungeon map. And it's at this point that we start seeing a trend started by Dungeon 4, where we're now going to have usually more than 2 floors. And if there are 2 floors, like in this case, you're constantly flip-flopping between them, and they are huge. Also, just use the ocarina to get back to the first room, just because it doesn't take as long. You know, one thing that's always kind of bothered me about Ancient Stone Tablets is in the musical department, at least in the versions that you can play nowadays. Not so much in the original broadcast, just because of how the soundtrack worked for that. They only use the Dark World dungeon theme. They don't use the one that plays during the 3 dungeons in the Light World of Link's Past. I think it's called Sanctuary Dungeon. They never played that, which disappoints me, because that was my favorite dungeon song in the original Link to the Past. Such a good theme. Mind you, as I've said before, A Link to the Past, while I find it kind of overplayed and overhyped as a game, but while still finding it solid, don't get me wrong, I think it has some of the best songs in the series for dungeons. And probably, no, not my favorite credits theme in Zelda history, that's Majora's Mask. But a damn good one, that's for certain. Either I'm doing a little sidetrack here, just get some extra rupees, because that's always nice. I do like that this game does, even if it kind of fails at hiding it because of the map, it tries to do the hiding secrets within secrets thing that I actually really like when games do, because it causes you to think of further possibilities like that. Now, I can't think of another game that does it off the top of my head, aside from maybe some of the Castlevania games, but I love it when games do it. Like, oh, actually, there's one right there. Symphony of the Night. In the outer wall, in the first castle, there is a room that looks empty, but if you destroy a wall, there's a turkey there. You can then stand where the turkey was for about, I think, 10 seconds or something, and an elevator appears that drags you down to the room below it that you wouldn't be able to get to otherwise for a while, and gets, I think, the mirror cuirass, and, yeah, cuirass, that's great, Kyle. Cuirass and the jewel gauntlets, which is very useful to have early on in the game because the fists are just really good. On the whole, I actually have to say that this dungeon's still fairly easy. I know I can say that for basically the entirety of the game, but something about this one really just stands out in my mind as kind of uninteresting and dull. Also, something you can see going on the text on the bottom, a bit of a subplot that I'm surprised they didn't actually make a gameplay element in Week 3 was that Agina is constantly trying to find the Bukumudora in Link's basement. I'm not even sure how that house has a basement, but apparently he does. I wonder why they didn't just make that like a little sub-dungeon you had to go through in order to find the Bukumudora. Maybe make that some extra points for the score at the end of the week. Speaking of which, I mentioned last part that I was going to get a bit more in-depth with the score system, because it's not as cut and dry as the end result system makes it look. First off, you get points for more than just that stuff. You get 500 points for opening a chest, no matter what's inside of it. For every small key you find, you get 1,000 points. For every piece of heart, that's 1,000. Dungeon items, 1,000. I think dungeon item means like map, compass, big key, probably even the dungeon item, but I'm not entirely sure about that. Heart containers, 5,000. A special item, which I'm not even sure what that's classified as, is 5,000. Talking to the mole is 10,000. Saving Zelda in week 1 is 10,000. Saving the Smith in week 2 is 10,000. Doing something in this week is 10,000. Doing something in week 4 is 5,000. And then you get the 2 interesting ones. I'm not going to go over one of them because you don't do that until the end of week 4. But for every tablet you find, you get 40,000 points. By the way, Upgrade Thief is right here. The score of the tablets is actually technically a variable because it's 40,000 at the base. However, 500 points are subtracted for every minute that passes. And I'm not sure exactly how that works with the second one. I think maybe for the second tablet it goes 40,000 minus 500 for every minute that passes after you get the first one. So like in the case of right now, since we're 14 minutes in, because it does count the 6 minutes before the game starts, that would be 40,000 times 14 times 500. What is that? 20, 50... That's about minus 7,000 points, so about 3,300. I think I did that math right in my head. I'm not very... well, actually, no, I'm decent at math, but once you start getting variables and shit in there, I'm going to have errors. Not good at English, either. I'm good at getting ideas and flowing them together, but I'm not good at, like, grammar and shit. Science I was always kind of decent at. Not so much social studies. / history. I'm a very interesting individual at school. I want to say that it's around now that they really start bumping up the amount of rupees you can get in dungeons. Like, at the start of the game, it was usually like a lot of 20s and such, but now it's a lot of 100s. And I think that has to do with the fact of the increasing costs for, like, upgrade thieves and shit. Oh, and that's a thing. At the 15th minute of this week, a golden bee shows up to help you kill enemies. I don't know why. That's kind of pointless in the long run because it doesn't do too much. In terms of interesting timed events for right now, the nearest good ones are, first off, at the 17th minute, the gold potion will be available at the magic shop, so you can get that if you like using that. At the 20th minute, this gold bee will disappear. However, you can actually catch the bee in a bottle and keep it with you. I'm not sure if it'll carry into the next week, but that means you can have a golden bee with you in order to help out with some, like, boss fights or some shit. At the 22nd minute, that's when the really beneficial one is, especially if you're me. You get infinite bombs. Mind you, at this point, I have 40, which means that is more than enough. But that's still pretty good. I think the first week has the most timed events because they're trying to introduce you to a lot of stuff, and there's a lot more things you need to do for plot around there. And here's the dungeon item, the power gloves. They fill our arms with power. You can lift and carry stones, and screw you, no, I'm not doing the wizard clip this time. Because that's probably one of the few running jokes I've kind of had through my LPs, is just inserting the clip of Lucas or something from the Lucas scene in The Wizard. But, you know, I like that movie. I like The Wizard fine and dandy. I think it's a very enjoyable bad movie. And possibly the best commercial of all time due to Mario 3. But, yeah, I get tired of using that clip, you know? I mean, sure, I could use the Freddy Krueger clip from that one Nightmare on Elm Street movie, but that was just probably the weirdest scene in those entire series, really. Aside from probably one of the ones in Freddy vs. Jason. You know, I do have to wonder, because I'm kind of out of things to talk about due to the lack of things going on in the dungeon at the moment, why they never... Well, actually, no, there's something interesting. Level 3 Blade is in this dungeon for some reason. So now we do 3 damage, so that's interesting. That means spin attack does 6, so therefore it is so good. As I was about to say. Besides that, as I got contradicted immediately, one thing I've always wondered is why Nintendo never really thought about re-releasing any of the BS Zelda games. I can understand maybe Ancient Stone Tablets due to the whole timed aspect and the fact that it's nothing really new in terms of structure. But why didn't they, like, release the original BS Legend of Zelda, like maps technically 3 and 4 Zelda 1, as, like, a virtual console exclusive kind of thing, you know what I mean? Because Zelda 1 is a fairly substantial game. If they just get rid of the voice acting and maybe incorporate some of the remixed music, you would have more than enough. You would sell that easily. Either way, we're on to Dungeon 5's boss, which, if you recognize where we are, all of a sudden, should be familiar. It's the Lanmolas from the Desert Palace in Link to the Past. And they are pathetically easy here because we have a level 3 sword, which means they go down to about 2 spin attacks. That's actually a major complaint I have against Ancient Stone Tablets, is that the difficulty curve is basically non-existent. Because the game starts off easy, and then continues to be easy throughout. In fact, it gets even easier because, with the exception of maybe one boss later on, you have more than you're supposed to when you originally fight those guys in Link to the Past, which, not sure how I feel about that design decision. Either way, Stone Tablet number 5. You got a strange stone tablet. Does this stone tablet have some kind of significance? You'd think you'd figure that out by now. Either way, now we have to just kind of venture around and hopefully find some more stuff before entering the next dungeon. And the next dungeon is actually very readily available. If you check the map, it's just to the west of us. But as for my usual pattern, do the first dungeon, do some side quest stuff, then go to the next dungeon. Plus, there's a fairly major timed event coming up I don't want to miss by going into the next dungeon. Take a guess at what's in here. You probably already know because there's not much to collect in this game. That's also kind of a complaint I have about the game, too, thinking about it. While at 1997, at the time of this game's release, pieces of art were basically something you needed to have in Zelda as a collectible, and it's basically just tradition at that point, because Ocarina of Time was even out at this point, I believe. I think there should have been more collectibles of some sort. Nothing much, maybe just like the bombos, ether medallions, all that kind of stuff. But otherwise, it just makes the game feel kind of bare. I mean, sure, there's also the bottles, but there's only 4 of those. You can only get 1 per week. Either way, there's an upgrade thief there, and there's also immediately followed by a piece of heart gotten in a very interesting way. You might remember the one above the thief's minigame in week 1. We have to do the same thing here. Raise the pillars, and dash. And that's piece of heart number 4 for the week. I do somewhat think that heart pieces, in terms of progression in a game like this, should be more based on your progression in the game. Like, say here in week 3. You could get no heart pieces at first, that means you could go right into the dungeon. And after the dungeon, you can get 4 of them, getting a heart container. And then after the next dungeon, you get another 4. However, that also limits, first off, possibilities for exploration in a Zelda game, which is kind of important. And also, if you're just kind of bad at the game, you probably want to have as much health as you can, rather. So finding heart pieces as fast as you can is probably a better idea in the long run. Also, there was a piece of heart number there. That's number 5. Anyway, we're going to immediately fly over to Link's house because even though I was actually just in the exact area of the dungeon, there is not only going to be a timed event in the very near future that I need to be towards Lake Hylia to do, there's also some collectibles over here I can get right now. And as I mentioned earlier, at least I think I already forget what I said 12 minutes ago. If you check the world map, Lake Hylia has seen a pretty drastic decrease in size. Like, I want to say a third or at least half of the original size from A Link to the Past. Which, I don't understand why they did that from a design decision. Maybe they thought it was just too big to begin with for something you don't really do much in. But I guess Zelda. Yeah, that's the name of the world, Kyle. I guess Hyrule's been through a massive drought in recent years. Though some things never change. There is that house there. I'm actually not sure what's in there in this game. Probably still a fortune teller. Over here is a piece of heart, though. And in the area where the fountain where you gave money to increase your bombs and arrows was in the original game, there is now a cave. As usual. However, this one just has a thief that I think has more rupees even behind him. Though thinking about it, Lake Hylia having a drought is fairly accurate, because I think the last time Lake Hylia showed up in a game, on the consoles at least, was technically Skyward Sword, but it wasn't Lake Hylia yet, so that may have been even Twilight Princess. Of course, I'm talking about main Zelda games, not kind of like Hyrule Warriors, because it was in that. Also, you might hear that little tink sound effect every now and then. I'm not exactly sure what that is. I'm led to believe that that is the sound that happens when a minute progresses on the clock. Which gets really repetitive, by the way, if it is. But it gets kind of annoying. Thankfully, for the most part, you don't really tend to hear it over everything else. Either way, like in Link to the Past, under here there is this guy, and like last time, he'll give us a bottle. I always remember wowing myself when I found this area, because when I first played A Link to the Past, I was dumb, and for me to find an area like this to get something as overly useful as the bottle, that was an amazing moment for me. Either way, we're coming up on the 24th minute on the clock, and if you noticed on the text recently on the bottom, someone's missing, and immediately someone's drowning here at the lake. This is this week's rescue mission. Talking to him and giving him over to the castle like we're about to do gets us 10,000 points. And if you don't get here by, I want to say, somewhere in the 30s, he drowns. It's nothing really special, and I only do this just because I don't feel like letting an old man drown. That's kind of a bad way to go. But we do get to see something very interesting from doing this. You could technically see this just by coming to the castle anyway, but I'll talk about that in a moment. Right now, because Hyrule is in a safe time, technically, aside from what's going on, we get to see the King of Hyrule. Oh, so this is the hero of light. You're the one who saved the princess. You have my deepest thanks. Take it easy now, blah, blah, blah. I think, King of Red Lions aside in Wind Waker, that's, I think, the only time we've gotten to see the King of Hyrule in a game. Aside from his revived self at the end of the original, obviously. Either way,
we're back in the dungeon because, with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 6, we're going to head into that dungeon I just entered and finish off week 3. See you guys then.